I want to talk a little bit about ego, what it's good for, and how it holds you back. It's always a polarity. So, first you have to start with who we actually are. We're infinite and immortal and what was never created. And that means our atoms are connected to all the atoms, and there is only one being. Everything is an illusion. That's what the Buddhists say. It's all an illusion. The world is an illusion. Well, what is illusionary about it is the separation. We think that we're not the tree, the house, the sky, the stars. And that causes issues. And this is what the ego does. The ground of being is absolute inclusivity and unconditional love. That means it is inclusive. There is only one thing. The source is only one thing. You're part of that one thing. Everything is part of that one thing. There is only one thing. So you don't technically actually exist in any state of separation. And yet to function in this world, we need ego. So ego says, I am not my parents. I am not the tree. I'm not the ground. I'm not the sidewalk. I'm not the house. I'm not the car. And, you know, that's pretty useful for getting around in the world. But that's not the truth. The truth is, you are all those things. You know, I am not my abuser. I'm the victim. Yeah? Well, that separation right there causes an issue. You know, but it's useful. It's useful. So, ego is a repeating pattern of confirmation that you're in isolation. No, there is nobody helping me. There is no love for me. All that kind of stuff. And that's kind of true because, you know, your ego tells you that things are happening to you. But the illusion, that's the illusion. In reality, nothing's happening to anybody. There is no things, there is nothing. It's just existence. And the existence is, you know, vibrant, alive, conscious, and powerful. So the polarity ends up going, you know, I am the victim, you know, I am a creature, I am created, there's a God, there's a God's separation, and then there's me. So that I'm separate from God, I'm separate from nature, I'm separate from, you see what I'm saying? When you start making this list, it gets to be really painful. And it's not true. It's absolutely not true. Well, one of the things we're doing is we're going to go to unity consciousness, which means absolute inclusivity and unconditional love. That's where we're going. And you can't get there by having the ego's identity continually chiseled in stone. It's a pattern of thinking. It's a pattern of being. And this is why polarity flip-flops is so important, because, you know, you have, like, I'm the victim and I'm the perpetrator, or the world is good, the world is bad. And you work out these polarities, and at the end you go, it's beyond this, which is neti, which means unity consciousness. There is no me, there is no good, there is no bad. You see what I'm saying? But the ego doesn't want to say that. The ego wants to say, well, look, this is gravity, and this is air, and this is, you know, all this kind of things. But there's a good side of ego too, because as soon as you take responsibility for yourself and say, well, it's really my responsibility how I feel, what I feel. And so you take your pain, you look at your pain, and you know, you feel it out, you cry it out, you shout it out. But when you take responsibility for that, you can follow who's the good guys and who's the bad guys. So if you follow the sequence of events, mom and dad did this, and now I have this pattern in my life of I'm not feeling heard, or not feeling connected, or not being one. Yeah. So you follow that pain along And then you realize that what happened with your mom and dad when you were 7 or 10 years old is still a repeating pattern in your life. There's still a repeating separation, and the separation is pain. Remember, you are infinite and immortal in what was never created, and the ground of being is absolute inclusivity and unconditional love. So as soon as you keep the exclusion going, that was them, and that hurt then and it hurts now and all that kind of stuff, it keeps the exclusion going. It is the exclusivity, the exclusive thing that happened to you that made you feel pain, and that wasn't true. That was true for that hour, that day, or that year, but it's not true for the rest of your 50 years or however old you are. You see, so the pattern goes on. The ego makes the patterns, and the pattern is, I am separate, so you have separation anxiety, I'm alone, I'm weak, I'm all these kind of things, and they have us a whole list of judgments and denials. I'm not loved, I'm not worthy, people are against me, the aliens hate me, the reptiles are trying to get me, the AIs are trying to undermine me, and all this kind of stuff, which is there. They may be as true as the tree, and they may be as true as the sidewalk, but in reality, that's not it. So through your ego, you can see who's the good guys and who's the bad guys and what the flow is. Ego is also that part of you that in a movie, say it's a whodunit, who did the crime thing, So the rich guy is dead, and so you you're watching the movie to find out who did it. Is it the butler who did it? Is it the ex-wife? Is it the wife who did it, or is it the girlfriend who did it? It says so somewhere in that movie. Your ego will find out who's the perpetrator, and you go, oh, I can see who did it. It was the butler, or it was the butler who was in love with the wife, and blah blah blah. Right? Well, you do this. The ego's highest function is to do that to yourself. Who hurt you? Who hurt you? And who keeps that hurt going over decades and decades and decades? So when you go back to look at your original pain, your original events, your original childhood stuff, and you see when that pattern was formed, then what was also formed with that was the separation. That sustained it sustained the event, the trauma, the drama, the wounding for all those years. So you need the ego on one hand, but then you need the ego in order to transcend the ego to where there is no victim, there's no perpetrator, there's only unity, and that unity is absolute inclusivity and unconditional love. When you have pain, it's exclusive, right? So, and it's always in some kind of comparison. Compared to absolute inclusivity and unconditional love, I'm not feeling that. I'm feeling abused and yelled at and judged and hurt and all this kind of stuff. That's not unconditional love. That's conditional love. Yeah? And that hurts. The more conditions you have, the more judgments you have, the more beliefs you have, is the more pain is sustained. The less beliefs you have, the less judgments you have, the less thoughts you have, you get more unconditional love. Yeah, and this is why meditation is really important for a lot of people, and has been historically for people on a spiritual path. Because if you think, every thought is a division and a separation. You're thinking about this thing, this time, this event, this fantasy, this whatever, and you're not experiencing absolute inclusivity. Absolute inclusivity and unconditional love is a flat line. It doesn't move. It's stillness. Has no identity. It's just there. And when we meditate and stop our mind even for a few minutes of just stillness, then then you can see that that's what's real, is that stillness. So the meditation teachers say, go into the stillness, go into the void, go into the no mind. Yeah? So that's what that's all about. And it's true. So if you have an ego, if you have an identity, then you can train your mind, train yourself to not think in separation. When you stop thinking in separation, in other words, in meditation, you stop believing in the patterns of your your thoughts. Stop believing in the thoughts. You just let them go. You'd have no reaction to your thoughts. See, a thought is a reaction, and the reaction, where it hurts, you know, the alarm, that's the division away from unconditional love. Ow, right? So thinking itself wears you out. If you ever do a lot of work on the internet or something, it'll actually drain you, because you're getting involved in those waves of separation. And that has a little thrill to it, because you, oh, I gotta know more, I gotta think more, I gotta remember more, and stuff like that. In reality, you don't. That's the illusion. There's nothing for you to learn. You just still your mind, still the causes of your issues, and then you're back to what you were created, how you were created, which was out of that stillness. That's what it is to be in the spirit world. It's pretty still. So we need our ego on one hand, but the ego on the other hand is the cause of so much suffering that unless you can become in charge of, be sovereign, be the God of your ego and your energy. You know, that's another thing. See, we say, oh, I am not God. Well, yes, you are God. Oh no, I'm not the God. Then they will argue with you that you're separate from God. But that's not true. You know, even Christ would say, I and my Father are one, and I and my brother are one. There is only one, is what he's saying. There is only a oneness. There's not a two-ness, right? And it's there all the time. It's just a matter of looking at it that way and seeing the unity instead of seeing the separation. You know, I am the sky, I am the earth, I am the trees, I am the animals, I am the breeze, I am the moon, I am the stars, right? That's completely different than and I am love, right? That's completely different than what we've been conditioned and trained to do, to feel, to think, and to be. So you need your ego, and you need to do the process work. You need to work your way through it. Because here's what happens. If you don't do your emotional release work, which is the patterns, the shadow work, which is the patterns of thought, the patterns of being, the patterns of wounding, the patterns of existence, the patterns of carrying on a mess inside you. If you don't do that work, but you do, let's say you do the meditation work, or you do intense yoga, or you do intense exercise like track or jogging, or you know, aerobics, or whatever that stuff is. Well, okay, you do all these things, meditation or aerobics or you know, boxing or whatever it is, whatever you're doing to physically be louder than your own mind, and you get into what they call the zone, which is like a no mind. You're just doing with no mind. So you train to do that. But what happens is when you stop doing that, when you stop meditating, or when you stop what do you call it, you know, doing yoga, or when you stop whatever your activity is that keeps you engaged, it keeps the mind engaged, so it's not into the division mode, it's just into an action mode, which is like a kind of a unity in action. When you stop all that, then all your patterns come back, right? And that's kind of what Language Lessons of the Heart is, to break the patterns. And to break the patterns, you have to create new patterns. So that's what the 4 processes are. You know, you say the empowerment, then you say that 10,000 times, because Your pattern is more written in stone than, it actually takes months and months to create a new pattern of the way of seeing and the way of feeling and the way of being. It takes a long time to do that if you want to do it. So there's the empowerment process. The emotional release is really important because you're feeling this pain of the separation. Pain is always the separation from absolute inclusivity, from being yourself, or being pushed around, from being hurt and violated. Yeah. So when you shout out that pain, it connects. Instead of being separate from your pain, which is what suppression and denial is, separate from. When you shout it out, it unites your mind with your pain. And this is a wake-up call for the mind, because the mind, pretty soon, the spirit, your spirit and your ego pretty soon figures it out that, wait a minute, we've been feeling this since a long time, and we're still feeling it, and now we're screaming. So you have to raise your vibration higher than the suppression, yeah? Because the suppression keeps the separation in place, and the separation is what causes the pain. So you scream out, ah, ooh, ah, whatever it is, ah, yeah? That, and you have to be as full on as you can at some point, whether it's grieving or rage or fear or whatever's going on, right? Whatever the feeling wants to be, sorrow, right? Or sadness. You have to unite with that back again, and this changes your mind and the pattern. It has to be at an amplitude higher than the original, what it took to get the pattern in place. And then when you're there, you can hear the judgments and the beliefs that separated you. This is so important. And as soon as you can see that and you realize, well, that's not true anymore. I'm competent, a good person and all that kind of stuff. It's not true that I'm, low life or scum of the earth or whatever the separation is telling you, or not worthy or not good enough, all that kind of stuff. Okay, so that's the empowerment, and then there's the emotional release. Like you cannot do enough emotion release. If you did it every week for a couple of years, all your issues, there's only so many issues, there's only so many separations, there's only so many beliefs, it's not infinite, right? It only feels infinite because it's denied and it's covered up with pain. Don't go there, don't look there, don't want to do that, I'll fall apart, I'll go crazy, whatever, okay? Then the next one is this judgment and denial release. It is the words from the spirit, which is your mind and your ego. It is the words of that form the pattern. I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough vibrates over here, and ow, or nobody loves me, and it goes, ow, nobody loves me, right? So there's the thought and the feeling. And as soon as you can interrupt the pattern by changing the thoughts, changing the beliefs, changing the judgments, changing the denials, bring them up to your computer screen up here where you can see them, you're aware of them, you're conscious of them, and you release them. You release them just like if they were little people who said things to you, your mom, your uncle, somebody who molested you or hurt you. You release those people. You release those people as the words. And then you bring in what you do like. Oh, I'm a good person, I'm talented, I'm incredible, I'm got loving and all that. So for every judgment, you replace it with 6 worthy opposite things, that are empowering. And then there's talking to the parts of self. And it's the parts of self that has to deal on the physical level with all the stuff that was been carried on in these patterns. So the patterns of your life, both good and bad, are reflected in your body, they're reflected in your heart, they're reflected in your will, and it becomes a burden on them, because then they feel separate too. So you can do a tremendous amount of you can do inner child work by talking to your parts of self. You can do inner guidance and counseling. You can do inner love, increase your love. So you can actually increase your love 4 times, right? So spirit, heart, will, and body, I love you. Let's know how we're doing, family, and you can get a harmony, you get a little healing team going on there. And this is amazing. This has never been taught in the history of Earth. Never. And it's a very powerful tool. So you can do counseling, you know, and you can have, conflict issues, like you say, ask the spirit, who's hurting here? Who's responsible for, who's feeling all this pain over there? And who's not getting their needs met? You can fine tune what the vibrational frequency is of your heart, your will, your body, and your spirit, and get them really actually working together to smooth out all the separation, smooth out all the discord, smooth out and change all the expectations and beliefs and judgments and all that stuff that are part of the pattern of pain, part of the pattern of loneliness, part of the pattern of inadequacy, part of the pattern of all of the separation away from source. So those are the 4 processes, and in order to do that you do need a certain amount of ego, there's no question about it, but you need the ego to be on track with your healing. As soon as you put your ego on track with your healing, then it becomes an ally. But the ego's job is to, so you don't run into the tree. Well, obviously if you walked into a wall it's going to hurt, so you do need to know that there's a wall there, and that if you walk into the wall it'll hurt. That's what the ego's for. Or there's a dog that lives across the street, and watch out for him, he might come and bite you. So you need that, okay? But when it's running on subconscious, and it's based on fear of pain or anger at being in pain, then everything becomes a separation and isolation. It might have been true when you're 7 or 10, you know, but it's not true now. There is no, you look on your arms, there's no chains. Right? There's no shackles. Right? Nobody's got a gun to your head. So what that means is the perpetrators are not there anymore. You're the perpetrator. So you really are the perpetrator and the victim. That's kind of a hard pill to swallow, but that's the way it is. If you're just living your life on automatic, then you automatically will run into a disaster. You run off the road. All right, so that's my 2 cents on ego.